the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
This is a case that's been bounced around back and forth throughout the court system.
Everybody has a right if they're a responsible adult.
Something is happening to gun owners across America that most people don't see until it's too late. It's not a single dramatic law or executive order. It's not soldiers going door to door confiscating weapons. It's something far more insidious, a coordinated web of restrictions, financial pressures, and bureaucratic nightmares designed to make gun ownership so expensive, so complicated, and so legally treacherous that millions of Americans will simply give up their Second Amendment rights without a fight. Recent warnings from the former president have exposed this multi-layered assault in stark detail, and what's being revealed should alarm every American who values constitutional freedoms. Because what's unfolding isn't theory or speculation. It's documented, it's accelerating, and it's working exactly as designed. Right now, while you're reading this, thousands of gun owners are being quietly severed from the financial system, and most don't even understand why it's happening. Between 2022 and 2024, over 300 firearms-related businesses had their merchant accounts terminated without any legal violation, criminal charge, or court order. These aren't shady operations or fly-by-night dealers. We're talking about family-owned gun shops that operated for decades, suddenly receiving letters stating their accounts are closed effective immediately. No explanation, no appeal process, nothing. Consider this real example. A gun store owner in Pennsylvania operated his business for 37 years without a single legal issue. Then his bank shut down his business account with 72 hours notice. When he asked why, he received vague references to risk management and corporate policy changes. But here's where it gets personal for individual gun owners, not just businesses. Credit monitoring reports reveal a disturbing pattern where consumers who make perfectly legal firearm purchases are seeing their credit scores mysteriously drop by 20 to 40 points within weeks of the transaction. Payment processors are implementing what they euphemistically call heightened monitoring for any business in the firearms category. In practice, this means every transaction gets delayed, every deposit gets held for extended review, and any spike in sales triggers an immediate account freeze. Banks are effectively creating a financial quarantine around the gun industry without passing a single law. They're using corporate policy to accomplish what legislation couldn't, making it nearly impossible to conduct firearms commerce through normal banking channels. While Americans focused on domestic politics and cultural battles, an international regulatory framework was being quietly constructed that could override gun rights without a single congressional vote. The UN Arms Trade Treaty contains provisions requiring member nations to track and monitor civilian firearm ownership. Even though the United States officially withdrew from this treaty in 2019, compliance with its standards is being implemented anyway through federal agency regulations that fly under the radar. The ATF has issued 43 new rules since 2021, and 31 of them align perfectly with arms trade treaty requirements despite the treaty never being ratified by the Senate. We're talking about enhanced record keeping that mirrors international databases, mandatory reporting that feeds into global tracking systems, and classification standards based on UN definitions rather than American constitutional law. Here's a number that should alarm you. The ATF now requires dealers to maintain records for 25 years instead of 20, and these records must be in formats compatible with international law enforcement sharing agreements. Several international bodies have issued reports specifically targeting American gun culture as a global security threat, and these reports are being cited in domestic court cases as expert evidence. One case in the Ninth Circuit actually referenced a UN report on firearms violence as justification for upholding state-level restrictions. Think about that. American judges are using international organizations' opinions to interpret the United States Constitution. This international pressure coordinates with something happening at the state level that creates an impossible legal maze for gun owners trying to remain compliant. 17 states passed nearly identical gun control measures within the same 18-month period. The language in these bills is so similar that in some cases they contain the exact same typos, the same grammatical errors, the same unusual phrasing, the same technical mistakes. This isn't separate states acting independently in response to local concerns. This is coordinated legislation designed to create a nationwide restriction without requiring federal action that would face constitutional scrutiny. Organizations like the Giffords Law Center and Everytown for Gun Safety have created model legislation templates distributed to state legislators simultaneously. Internal documents show they coordinate which states introduce which bills to maximize legal and political impact. The strategy is sophisticated. California passes ammunition background check laws. 6 months later, New York adopts the same system. Then New Jersey implements it. Suddenly, you have regional requirements that didn't come from Congress, but function like federal mandates. These laws are specifically designed to create overlapping jurisdictions that make legal gun ownership a compliance nightmare. You might be following your state's laws perfectly, while unknowingly violating another state's regulations during interstate travel. Technology companies are developing firearms that connect to the internet, require biometric authentication, and record data about every single shot fired. This isn't science fiction, it's in production right now. New Jersey's smart gun law from 2002 is being revived, and the technology finally exists to implement it. These aren't simple guns with fingerprint readers. We're talking about weapons using GPS tracking, wireless connectivity, and cloud-based authentication systems. One manufacturer already has a production model that logs the time, date, and location coordinates of every trigger pull and uploads that data to company servers. Let that sink in for a moment. California is considering legislation making these smart guns mandatory for all new purchases within 5 years of the technology being commercially available. Think about what that creates. A database of when and where every single shot was fired, accessible to the manufacturer, vulnerable to hacking, discoverable in lawsuits, and potentially accessible to government agencies through subpoena or warrant. Massachusetts has proposed offering tax credits up to $1,200 for anyone who trades in a traditional firearm for a smart gun, essentially using taxpayer money to incentivize adoption of tracking technology. The former president's warnings specifically highlighted this technological angle as one of the most dangerous long-term threats to gun rights because it normalizes surveillance while appearing to offer safety improvements. Gun control advocates realize direct firearms bans face insurmountable constitutional obstacles, so they've shifted to strangling ammunition access instead, and the strategy is working frighteningly well. California now requires a background check for every single ammunition purchase, and the system denied over 100,000 transactions in its first 2 years of operation. That's 100,000 instances where law-abiding gun owners were prevented from buying bullets, often due to database errors, name mismatches, or system glitches that incorrectly flag people. One documented case involved a woman in Los Angeles denied ammunition purchases because the state database showed her driver's license address didn't match her firearm registration address. She had moved legally, updated everything through proper channels, but the systems weren't synchronized. Fixing the error required 8 months and legal representation. But restriction isn't just at point of sale. Several states are implementing magazine capacity limits that make standard firearms effectively useless. A Glock 17, one of the most common handguns in America with over 8 million produced, comes standard with a 17-round magazine. In states with 10-round limits, that firearm is immediately non-compliant. One lawsuit in Illinois is demanding ammunition manufacturers implement serialization systems where every single bullet receives a unique tracking number. The cost implications would make ammunition prohibitively expensive for average citizens while doing absolutely nothing to prevent criminals from obtaining it through black markets. When people can't afford to train with their firearms, they become less proficient, less confident, and more likely to abandon ownership entirely, which appears to be the actual goal. States are implementing training requirements that sound perfectly reasonable in press releases until you examine the actual details that reveal the true agenda. New York now requires 18 hours of classroom instruction, 2 hours of live fire training, and a written exam just to apply for a permit. The cost for approved training courses ranges from $400 to $1,200, and there are only 47 approved instructors for a state with 19 million people. That creates waiting times exceeding 14 months just to get into a class. Illinois requires 16 hours of training, including live fire demonstration of proficiency. But here's the deliberate trap. Training must be completed within 12 months before applying, yet the application process itself takes up to 18 months. If your training expires while waiting for application processing, you have to start over and pay again. Maryland requires 8 hours of classroom instruction covering legal review, home safety, and handgun mechanisms, plus a live fire component, but the state only recognizes training from Maryland State Police-approved instructors, and obtaining that approval requires insurance coverage most instructors cannot afford. Some Maryland counties have 0 approved instructors, meaning residents must travel over 100 miles and take time off work just to access required training. Here's where everything connects into a comprehensive system designed to make gun ownership impossible without technically banning guns. You can't transport firearms across state lines because of coordinated regional laws. You can't afford ammunition because of taxation, serialization, and background check fees. You can't obtain required training because there are no approved instructors within reasonable distance. You can't practice because ranges are systematically being closed through zoning changes, noise complaints, and environmental regulations. And soon traditional firearms will become obsolete because of smart gun mandates. We've already witnessed this exact outcome in other countries. Australia didn't ban guns. They made ownership so restricted and expensive that participation dropped 68%. The United Kingdom didn't ban guns. They created licensing so complex that ownership fell 77% over 30 years. Recent warnings from the former president include a specific timeline. If these interlocking systems aren't challenged within the next 18 to 24 months, they'll become too embedded in state infrastructure, corporate policy, and legal precedent to remove. This is why he's characterizing it as a final warning rather than routine political rhetoric. We're at a decision point where these threats either get confronted and dismantled now, or they become permanent features of American life. A slow-motion repeal of the Second Amendment accomplished not through constitutional amendment, but through bureaucratic suffocation. The choice isn't between gun rights and gun control anymore. It's between understanding what's happening while there's still time to respond, or waking up one day to discover your rights evaporated through 1,000 small cuts you never saw coming.